your wait. I know it's the evening and we're kind of outside of working hours, but I absolutely, just in the name of humanity, I'd love to see faces. So if you could see a way to turning your video on, I would be so happy about that.
Oh, the humanity, he's making us show our faces. That's the end of the talk today, right, John?
There we go. There we go. That's the whole thing. All right, let's talk about the Agile space. Let me get my screen share going here. You guys see that all right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. This is my depiction of the Agile space. The thing about that is that it's not much of a space anymore. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. And if you could show me, did you know how to raise your hand in Zoom? If you know how to raise your hand in Zoom, please put your hand up if you've professionally used or are using any of these tools, frameworks, certifications, anything. And I should see a lot of hands because like we have Kanban and Scrum on here. Never mind SAFe looming in the background there. Okay, so while you guys are doing that, I want to kind of talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant is that every one of these things that we're using is a solution. But do we know what the problem is? So I'll show you a problem that I think is happening here. I'm going to ask 6 questions, and I'll keep your hands up if you put your hands up. Actually, I'd love for everybody to put your hands up because we're going to do a thing where these are 6 yes or no questions. And I want you to think about your team or teams that you work with day to day. You know, I presume you're in some stage of working in an Agile way. You know, one or more of those tools and frameworks that we just saw. And as I ask a question, if the answer is no, just put your hand down and keep it down. And we'll see if anybody makes it through all 6 questions, all right? Okay, first question. Is the team empowered to change their process based on what they learn? Put your hand down if that's not the case. Is the team empowered to change their process based on what they learn? Okay, second question. Is there a product charter or document that lays out the mission and strategic goals for the team's work? Has to be written down. Okay. Third question, do all members of the team understand the mission and the goals? And are they able to see how their work contributes to both? Okay, is your team delivering working software to some subset of real users at least every 2 weeks and gathering feedback? Real users, not the pretend ones down the hall. Okay, and is the feedback from users turned into concrete work items for teams on timelines shorter than a month? Okay, and are your teams empowered to change the requirements based on user feedback? All right. Well, we've got a couple of hands still up. So I'd like to let's have a round of applause, please, because those folks with the hands still up, they have passed the United States Department of Defense Agile bullshit detector. So this is a real thing. I don't know if you've seen this before, but this is how the Department of Defense, the DoD, detects what they actually call out in here as Agile bullshit. And you can imagine a large government entity like the DoD does lots of contracting with software firms of various caliber and experience, and Probably these days, every one of them is claiming to be agile. Well, they had to sort of grow antibodies for the ones who were kind of sliding that into their resume unwarranted. So they developed this 6-question rubric that I just read off to you to kind of sniff that out. And granted, I'm an agile consultant, so where I go tends to be where people are having difficulty, taking on agile ways of working. But in most of my travels, in doing that, the teams that say no to any of those questions, 100% of the time, they are always convinced that the problem is about process. It's about mechanics, and what they're actually, their constraints of how we do things, not necessarily how we're looking at things. This is Eric. Eric is one of those people that says kind of wicked smart things that make you cheer, like you go, yeah, what he said. And then when you think about it a second time, you realize that he's actually talking about something that you do, or it's something that you're a problem of, and then you kind of feel bad, go, oh. And he said, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. Oh. So this meetup and groups like it and conferences and things like that, this exists because the exchange of ideas is what propels us as knowledge workers. But let's face it, in the agile corner of the industry, there is a dark underbelly. There's plenty of questionable money to be made because we and the teams we work with, we are so confused about what the actual problem is. And that's that elephant in the room. There's so much great work being done in this space, but frankly, the results are not what they should be. And I think it's because we're teaching solutions first. I think it's because we're not talking about what the problem is. This is why Scrum becomes a 2-week death march with a soul-sucking daily status update. Why things like extreme programming and software craftsmanship devolve into a way for a frustrated senior developer to have tyrannical control over a code base because she doesn't have much say in anything that goes on outside of it. And it's why SAFe is simultaneously a whole career path and also the butt of many industry jokes. So that's the elephant in the room, that we're starting from the wrong place, the wrong idea when we introduce agility to people and when we try to help them if they've been introduced in the wrong way. Teaching process, teaching tools, even teaching from the original Agile manifesto, I think is the wrong way to start working with agility. So my name is John. I've been a software professional for about 20 years. I started off as a developer. I was an architect for a little while. I'm not sure what that means. I did it for 5 years, and I'm still not exactly sure what that entailed. And what I do these days can most concisely be summed up with the phrase nerd coach. And it involves a fair amount of this whole speaking in front of slides thing. I am currently consulting with Industrial Logic. You may remember us as the Modern Agile people. And rather than show you a bunch of certifications, here are some of the books that have changed me. I feel like this is a little more effective than showing you my certs, because if you've read the same books, you know what to expect from my thinking because of them. No exam fee required. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about industrialism, and there's a whole thing about meatloaf. We're going to talk about what I call the organizing principle of agility. And then we're going to bring humanity into this. We're going to talk about putting it in the right place relative to the work that we're doing. Okay, so let's start with industrialism. This is Fred. You may recognize Fred. He has, even if you don't recognize him, he has put a few notions about work into your head, and they've stuck. So his book, his 1911 book, The Principles of Scientific Management, was voted the most influential management book of the 20th century. So who here knows Fred? All right, you guys know Frederick Taylor. Oh, Taylorism? Oh, this is our villain. This is the guy we're not supposed to like. This is the arch nemesis of Agile, and we should be very mad and throw things at the screen now. Except that we shouldn't. We shouldn't do that. This man was a genius. Please don't demonize him. He made our modern life possible with his idea. And this man and his ideas and his contemporaries of the industrial age achieved a great thing. They brought us out of an agrarian society and into an industrial one. We scaled up all of we pooled our resources and were able to scale in incredible ways. And just about everything maybe in the room around you and this thing that we're doing now is all sitting on his shoulders. And it comes down mostly to this idea of subdivision of labor. He says work can be done more economically by the subdivision of labor. Each act of each mechanic, for example, should be preceded by various preparatory acts done by other men. So we're breaking down, the complex work until it can be done by mobs of unskilled people. And this was the juice of the 20th century. This is incredible. So we break down this work until any Joe off the street could do the job. And then another genius like Henry Ford comes along and hires all the Joes. He put this into action and famously, developed the modern assembly line. And this was awesome. Scientific management and in this industrial way of looking at things allowed us to build magnificent machines out of people. And at the dawn of the 20th century, this was the right next problem to solve. The real question about this is that if that was such a fantastic thing to do, humans have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Why didn't we figure this out earlier? Why isn't this even a deeper history lesson? Why is this such a recent development? Well, the thing is that in order to make this work, like that idea sounds great, but in order to actually make it work where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, you need to get people to do two things that people don't normally do. These things are not normal human behavior. And that's, you need to get them to show up on time and to follow instructions. And of course, you can incentivize people in jobs with pay and a sense of security and purpose and belonging. But really, this is what you had to get them to do to make the machine work. And it wasn't easy. They had to go real deep in order to get people to show up in time and follow instructions here at the factory. They had to start early. They had to convince us from an early age and make us believe that this is what work looks like. You show up on time, sit in the desk, wait for the bell. There's a person up front who's telling you information and giving you instructions. You follow that. You face front. You don't look at your neighbor's paper. And this is what work looks like. If you follow those rules, you will be rewarded first with A's, then with a job and pay. And it's still here. Now, this may be what it looks like where you work. It might not. Things are significantly different in the last couple of years, of course. But isn't this all just a little bit stuck in there? Because this is what work looks like, right? And of course, it's a little more subtle than that. Your boss expects, as professionals, our bosses expect more from us than to just show up on time and follow instructions. And we get on a conscious level that we're not just coming in, punching a clock and cranking out widgets. And it's probably been a while since you were scolded for not being at your desk at 8 a.m. sharp. But I bet your company still has an organization chart that looks like this. I've actually looked into it, and most major HR software that produces charts like this doesn't have any other option. You can turn it sideways. That's about as good as it gets, right? But let's talk about this picture. What is this picture? In the person at the top, in that top box, that person knows everything there is to know about the work this company does or the work this organization does, right? And what they are doing based on Taylor's principle, they are subdividing that job, what they know about that job, and assigning that to a smaller, like a team of other people. And those people are taking those jobs and subdividing those, and so on until we get to this bottom row here. And that bottom row in this picture, with the idea that this is meant to convey, is that those people have no skill and can be counted on to follow instructions. And this is a fine design for predictable mechanical work with command and control, oversight, and this bottom row, it doesn't call for people who have to make decisions. The decisions, as you know, are all up and around and through the branches, not the leaves of the tree. Now, if you've got a primarily knowledge work organization that looks at itself like this, you've got at that bottom row, you're asking people with college degrees, intense levels of skill and experience. You're asking them to come in on time and follow instructions. And you've got an incredible brain power and talent leak in your organization, if nothing else. And even if you're not overtly imposing this on that organization, it's still in here. This is still how we think about what an organization looks like. We talk about people being above or over other people, or over a department, people being under people. This is really the lingua franca of organizational design. And it's what we were raised obviously to believe about work. A modern successful company that looks at itself like this is modern and successful in spite of this. Let's talk about meatloaf for a second. You've probably heard this urban legend, so I'll be quick. But it's a little story about a mother and a daughter, and they're making meatloaf. And this meatloaf is very special. It's a family recipe. Part of the recipe is that they cut the ends like about an inch off the end of the meatloaf on each side before they put it into the pan and into the oven. And the teenage daughter, she's a smart cookie. She says, Mom, why do we do this? Why do we cut the ends off the meatloaf? And the mom looks like taken by surprise by the question. She really hadn't thought about it. And she said, honey, I don't know. I don't know why we do that. So they call up their grandma, and this is, like I said, it's a recipe that's been passed down. So the mother calls her mother and asks the same, hey, my daughter asked this, this really interesting question. Why do we cut the ends off the meatloaf? And there's a nervous laugh on the other end of the phone, and grandma doesn't know either. She did it that way because her mother taught her to do it that way. So fortunately, the great-grandmother's still alive, and the next time they were visiting her in a nearby nursing home, she's kind of sitting very still, very quiet. She doesn't talk much these days, but she's still with us, so that's nice. And they ask, they kind of very carefully ask, great grandma, why do we cut the ends off the meatloaf before we put it into the oven? And she just comes to life with this cackle of laughter, and a little bit of dust flies off her. She's old, guys, get it? She's old. Anyway, so she's through her laugh, she says, I don't know why you're doing it. I did it because I didn't have a big enough pan. And so obviously this is, it's a fun little joke. Look how stupid the meatloaf people are. And they didn't even really think about what they were doing. But there are so many things that we do like this because that's how we were taught to do them. That's how, it's just always been done like this. And it almost doesn't occur to us to rethink these solved problems. And so it's a really great story as far as that goes. But in this case, for me, talking about organizational design and the way we look at work, this is even more of this is like a strong visual metaphor for me. We're cutting the ends off the meatloaf. We are cutting the ends off of our organizations. Here, let me show you what I mean. So this is an organization that does work and interacts with people outside of the machine, right? There's customers, there's vendors, there's other relationships involved in doing that work. And some of the parts of this machine, some of the people here get to talk to those customers and vendors directly. But by design, most of them do not. Does anybody here talk to customers and people outside of your organization as part of your job? Yeah, it's a mixed bag, not everybody. Okay, so what's more, the design, the communication chain here, this flow is designed to limit the flow of ideas and human interaction in both inside and outside. So, like if you can imagine, if you guys are working in software development, that behind one of these brick walls is a team building an API, and behind another one is a team building the user interface or the thing that consumes that API. And there's this crazy brick wall in between. This is what it's designed to do. Now, of course, we have mechanisms to, we're not allowed to talk to those people, but it's really discouraged by the design of our organizations. And this was intentional in a factory, in a mechanistic command and control way, because you don't want those people crossing their wires and getting each other's instructions and things like that. That would really break the machine. So we're definitely swimming upstream here in trying to do knowledge work and looking at things like this. And we're slicing the ends off of the human organism that we're trying to do this work with. It used to make sense in Taylor's solution to his problem in Ford's day. It made sense. Now it's wasteful and it's a little silly. So let's talk about agility. This is Renee. Now, Renee didn't have a whole lot to say on the subject of agile software development, but he did say that if you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that you doubt as far as possible all things. And he used this method of doubt that we now call Cartesian doubt to understand his world and to peel it apart and build a philosophical model. And he would, systematically peel apart everything he could observe until he was left with what he saw as pure underlying truth, a priori truths, he called them. Where are my philosophy nerds at? You guys know this stuff, right? So in going down this rabbit hole about René Descartes, I applied a bit of Cartesian doubt myself. I doubted that Descartes himself came up with this on his own. Why hadn't they solved that problem earlier? And I checked, I was right. Cartesian doubting down to a priori truths is totally derived from Aristotle's notion of first principles. But I digress. The point here is that we are 20 plus years into the Agile movement, and we're still butting heads with people in the software industry who, for whatever reason, this isn't working for them. And it tells me that we need to examine what Agile is, what we're asking them to do, what are we not agreeing on here? We need to get down to a priori truths. We need to get down to first principles. first principles. I mean, we've got those. Marcy's got them right behind her on the wall on those beautiful tiles. We have principles, but these are not first principles. So there's I've seen many talks and blog posts about how we just need to get back to the Agile principles, and those are good, but this is not that talk. This is not what that is. These principles here are not first principles. They're not a priori truths. They contain assumptions and a point of view, and there's all kinds of hidden goodness rolled up inside these principles. But if we're going to get down to the truth, we have to unpack that. And the best way to do that, that I know of, is to ask why, is to sort of apply a Cartesian doubt cycle to each of the principles. So let's try that for a moment. And I encourage you guys to come off mute if you've got some thoughts to share. I want to make a little discussion about this. But let's take this principle, for example. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Why?
So in order to build something of value, because what developers are developing should be something that delivers business value.
Okay. So why wouldn't they just be able to write down all that stuff in a large project plan and hand it off? Why do they have to meet daily?
Because things change.
Right. You learn things through experimenting, and also you have to give and take. We can do this, but we found out it'll take longer to do than you're giving us time for.
Okay, so the work it's not, things change. The work is not predictable, and when they change, we have to talk about what we're going to do about that. Because sometimes it's valuable, but then sometimes we could learn something that makes the work not valuable anymore. You don't want people doing work that results in no value, right? Okay.
Right.
Cool.
One other thing I think that's important is that we often overlook the fact that developers have great ideas about how to solve problems, and we don't often give them the benefit of participating in that process. So meeting together on a regular basis helps to encourage that collaboration on what to build to solve that problem.
Yeah, fantastic point. We want to tap into that brain power. We don't want to just tell it what to do.
I think taking it down even lower, John, is humans communicate better when they're interacting and not handing pieces of paper back and forth. So put developers aside, business aside. If you want to work on something, you work better talking with people about it, discussing ideas, sharing ideas, not shuffling paper or following a value stream or something like that.
Yeah, this has to be navigated with other human beings. Yeah. Okay, let's do another one.
One thing to add here before we
Yes.
move on, sorry. I know it is important for business people to work closely together with developers on daily basis. But if we think from Agile perspective, we have already drilled down via product owner in the beginning of Scrum with a backlog in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we did our sprint planning, like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. And then we gave certain items to work to those developers. So sometimes the way I think it is important, but depends on how we are following through Agile. If product backlog, sprint backlog is already out there, then they're gonna be involved in review session for sure towards the end of the sprint. But again, it depends on how organization things and follow Agile methodology.
Yeah. Be careful with that term, true Agile. I don't know that everybody agrees on what that means. So it's an interesting. That's a place I think where we get into a bit of a car crash of ideas if we don't examine them together. But thank you. Yeah. So working software is the primary measure of progress. We have to use working software as the primary measure of progress. Why? Why do we have to do that? Why can't we just look at where we are on the Gantt chart?
You got to measure what you've created, and if it doesn't work, then you're not making any progress. You're not fulfilling the end need.
So you're saying there's
Output,
Yeah.
okay,
output versus outcomes,
very good.
right?
Yes, yes, we want to aim for outcomes, and we don't always know that the output is going to lead to them. All right, cool. Let's do one more. Agile processes promote sustainable development. Sponsors, developers, and users should all be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Why?
If only.
Can happen. Don't despair. Why do we want to maintain a constant pace and work in a sustainable way?
Because a product is a life cycle. We don't necessarily work in projects, right?
Okay.
We have the life cycle of a product. We'll always be building, and so we're in it for the long haul, and people need to have balance in their lives.
Okay. Good. And it's not linear. You're saying it's yeah.
Mm.
This speaks to team motivation, and what motivates the team and the team members to want to come to work every day, right? So you talked earlier about the Scrum being the death march to the end of the sprint.
Yeah.
We don't want death marches, right? We don't want to cause a lot of overtime, working nights, working weekends. And so sustainable development to me talks about sustaining a pace that allows for people to take the time to learn, take the time to take care of their families, whatever, so that they can continue to work on the product and achieve what it's designed to.
Yeah.
achieve.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to take care of the human condition here, because better ideas come from, even if we're just totally selfish about the success of the product, because people have better ideas when they're not stressed and overworked.
But besides the human side of it too, the constant pace produces some predictability, which helps, if you want to call it agile, the delivery of the product, or just in general, the predictability. Most humans react better to predictable environments than unpredictable environments. Lowers the stress.
Absolutely.
John,
Guys, this is great. I wish we had like loads of time to dig into like all 12 principles. There are 9 more that we didn't even touch, and we barely dug into these. So I encourage you to take this exercise back to your teams, buy them lunch, get them spread out for a couple of hours and do this. I think it's really going to bring to light a lot of things, even if you guys are, completely kicking ass at agility. So I've done this, and we've just done this, and we definitely go in different directions depending on who's in the room. And I've had similar thoughts to what you guys brought up. And when I do this, a pattern emerges consistently that draws me back to one. They kind of diverge and then they converge. There's one thing, one underlying, what I think is an a priori truth about the work of software. And I've arrogantly named it the organizing principle of agility, an organizing principle being a core assumption from which everything else by proximity to derive a classification or a value. So like this is the problem that we're trying to solve, that I was saying we haven't been talking about this. This is where I think we're failing to start with teaching agility. This is an idea that's more fundamental than any process. It's more basic than trust, feedback, quality, or any other agile hobby horse that we've ever been on. It's an idea that everybody seems to be talking around, but never about. But I think that our entire point as agilists hangs on, and that all agility flows from. It's this: the value of our work is unknowable until it's done and delivered to people. The value of our work is unknowable until it's done and delivered to people. Now, this is a weird sentence. I've thought about it a lot. It's at the same time, it's jarring. It feels overreaching. Like, well, there has to be some kind of work that we do that we know the value of for sure. And it also, at the same time, it feels like a little bit kindergarten, like, yeah, duh. Like it's obvious and also wrong at the same time. But if you think about this, the value of our work, it's not that it's unknown and we could go find it out. It's unknowable. It doesn't matter how much effort you put in up front before you've done the work. You can't know whether that work is going to yield value. That's the essence of, I think, software development work, product work. It's the essence of knowledge work, I think, in general, but I'm, trying to stay focused here so we can stay inside of an hour. And this truth is, I think, hinted at in the principles and values, but it's never like properly spelled out. But I think one of the things we have to start doing is to spell it out and break the spell of industrialism, this hangover that we have from the days of, when factory work and organizational charts made sense. Yes, Pam.
So not to wordsmith, but I'm troubled by the word delivered. What I think, prefer to see is used
Yes.
by people or used by our customers.
Yeah, and I think that's
Cool.
effectively what, but I mean, you can know it once it's knowable. You just have to get them to use it. And yeah, but I think you're right. I think that's a good edit. I'll take that. Used by people. Yeah, because then they're going to either through their behavior or through their words tell you whether it was valuable or not. Yeah. And this isn't a solution. The point is, this is a problem statement about knowledge work and our relationship to it. And back when, it's not back when, because we're still doing industrial work, right? When this problem statement is not true, when we can know the value of the work that we're doing, when work has linear, inherent, guaranteed this is going to work, industrialism makes sense. Right, and you can see this by we're getting better at it because we're taking the machines that were made out of people and we're turning some of those people parts into robots that do a hell of a better job of showing up on time and following instructions than people do. And I think I forget who said it, but it's very striking. I wish I had the quote, but somebody remarked that it's immoral to ask a human being to do work that could be automated, because we're so much better than that. If we have the technology to automate something, we shouldn't degrade a human being by asking them to do that. Industrialism, Taylorism, Fordism, industrialism in general worked because it removed the unpredictable element of humanity from predictable work. But it fails now in this context because it removes that generative, creative element of humanity from work that is, by its nature, unpredictable. And that unpredictable work calls for the unpredictability of human beings, the void, the unseeable emptiness that our ideas emerge from. That, if you're getting a paycheck for doing this work, that's what that paycheck is for. It's for that mysterious, unpredictable place where your ideas come from. It's your attention and idea generation focused on a business problem. The Agile Manifesto was and is a reaction to the overreach of industrialism. It's a solution to this problem. And the way that it solves this, it's a solution. I'm going to say it's not the solution, not necessarily. There could be other ways to solve that fundamental problem now that we've identified it, or now that I claim to have identified it. It's the Agile Manifesto's strategy in solving this problem was to restore rich human contact to work where it had been kind of sucked out by the machine of industry, to keep knowledge with work rather than separate it, which is what what kind of an upside down tree sort of org chart seeks to do. And when this works, when Agile works, it's because everyone involved in that team, that organization, whatever, they share an understanding, however explicit or implicit, they share an understanding that their work is not inherently valuable and that can't be known until it's being used by people. And they understand not only that problem, but what it takes to mitigate that problem. And agility is that's just the tool that they reach for. And it's really, I think it's just an effort to put work back in its place relative to humanity. So let's talk about some ways that we can do that. First, stop talking about Agile. How many times have you, as an Agilist in your professional environment, have you asked people to stop solutioning? We haven't even agreed on what the problem is yet. You do that all the time if you're like me, right? So we need to take our own medicine now. As Agilists, we need to stop offering solutions before everybody in the room is clear on what the problem is. We need to observe closely and watch for when that core problem of work not being inherently valuable, when that rears its head, when it appears, it's going to. That's the nature of this work. And when it shows up, what we need to do is point to it. We need to highlight it. We need to call people's attention to it. And without talking about process or tool or whatever, Agile thing that springs to mind, stop solution. Let's talk about the problem until everybody understands it. And then ask the team, ask them for their insight. How can we manage this? How can we talk about this? Get their ideas. Like Pam was saying before, I think, let's tap into people's, tap into that brain power there. We don't always have to have the answer. We just have to create the space where the answer happens. Ask them for their insight and experiment with them. Another thing we could do is align on purpose. So much of the time as in our organizations, we align on the job. We align on the work. Are these the work items that you're going to complete in this sprint? Rather than spending more of our time talking about, okay, here's the goal, like Pam Allen was saying, let's focus on the outcome over the output, right? And if you're an individual contributor, and you receive a work item that's not immediately clear to you what larger purpose it serves, why you're doing this, don't do it yet. Stop and go into toddler mode. Ask why. Ask why, like we did with the Agile principles, ask why about the work until you get to a reason that's not about software, right? The why can't be because that's how the API spells it out. You have to ask why until you get to a reason that's about human beings, because that's what we're here for. We're building software, yes, and that software has loads of technical requirements and lots of different stakeholders from different angles, but ultimately there's a human that we're serving with this, and we need to understand what they need and why we're doing this work. We need to help people see industrialism. So the first draft of this slide was help people to break the habits of industrialism or something like that. So it's help people stop, doing things in an industrial way. But you can't stop something you can't see. When our teams go through, they're using an Agile process, and they've got maybe some industrial thinking in there, and something goes wrong, which of those two things gets the blame? The Agile process or the industrial thinking? The Agile process, because nobody's going to blame something that they can't see, that's invisible, right? Industrialism is the atmosphere that we grew up in. It's the water, and we're fish. We can't see this because this is what we were taught work looks like. We have to talk about it, give it a name. I've given it a name. I still actually don't even like industrialism. It's not, I don't know. I'm kind of in an awkward spot actually, because the company I work for has industrial in the name, and my main client, the other contender for the word I was going for was Fordism, and that's actually a thing you can look up. But I have a wonderful client in the Ford Motor Company. So so I'm settling on industrialism. But in any case, we need to give this thing a name. This hangover from the 20th century way of looking at work, and we need to talk about it and call it out where we see it, so that we can choose something different consciously. We need to normalize uncertainty. Now, I think, business leaders get this. They get that business is not a sure thing, that that we're making bets, we're placing, we're trying things out with the market to see how the market responds. But I think internal to the organization, to the machine, there's an effort to remove uncertainty and to pretend that there's predictability where there isn't. And that comes mostly in the form of separating knowledge from work, right? We're taking the reasons for the work away from the work that we're doling out to people. That's, and that gives gives this uncomfortable illusion that everything here is going to work. It's a clear violation of the idea that we can't know the value of our work before it's done in a user's hands. We need to be clear and honest about what's not known at all levels of any organization. And rather than detailing, for example, detailing requirements for a thing we're going to build, don't detail them all the way out. Write down enough to start and enough to understand the problem and begin. If you have everything detailed out to where you don't need to collaborate before you're done with it, you've gone too far. Don't pretend to know don't pretend that you're certain about things that you're not certain about. Let's make that okay and normal. Managers, make space more than you make decisions. We need to support the infusion of actual humanity into this work, because that's what gets this work done. At the organizational level, the team level, the individual level. Some tactics, might include, don't force communication through the chain of command. Maybe take the word escalation out of your problem-solving vocabulary. If you're coaching, don't coach people to solve their own problems. Like, there's a tendency for a worker comes to a manager with a problem, and the manager says, "Oh, good, let me go up and around the org chart and solve that for you." No, the manager's job should be to coach that worker to seek solutions of their own. Like, we want to build their problem solving skills, not just take problems away from them. That's not gonna result in a human organization. We have to stop building machines out of people, and those are some ways we can do that. Rather than fixing things for people, let's build tools and kits and resources and make them available to people if we've got a repetitive problem that keeps happening. And then get out of the way and let humanity get this work done. Makers, individual contributors, show up. You may not have to show up on time, but you do have to show up on purpose. For any of this to work, you have to meet your managers halfway. You have to meet your organization halfway. You can no longer sit back and wait for your instructions and give up all responsibility. You have to be the humanity that I just asked the managers to make space for. Don't let them down. And this is frightening, because it means you're on the hook. It means you're going to make a decision, and that at least half the time you're going to be wrong. And your manager, if they're doing a good job, they will make this safe. They'll make it safe to be wrong and to try things. That's their job. But you have to try. You have to offer up things and be accountable. We need all the brains, especially yours, on board for this to work. Okay, so that was 6 things. Now that I've just given you a list of instructions to follow, that's 6 things that we can do to restore humanity to work. That's stop talking about Agile, align on purpose, help people to see industrialism so they can do something about it, normalize being unsure about things, uncertainty. Managers make space and makers show up. This is Tony. This is Tony Hoagland, an American poet. And in his poem, Wasp, he had this wonderful passage where he said a human being should have a warning label on the side that says disorganized narrative inside. We're messy. We're unpredictable. We're gross. But that's the point. This is the strength of human beings. This is our anti-fragility. This is our resilience, right? Our work, the right work for us to be doing now in this century is not predictable. And we need to stop pretending that it is. We need to stop trying to build machines out of people. This doesn't get us where we need to go. Our work is not inherently valuable, but the people who do it are. We need to get those two things in the right order. We need to intentionally put the horse before the cart there. What's going to lead us to success with the problems that we need to solve in this century is not your compliance, your machinery, your grade point averages, your process frameworks, your certifications, or how many views your post got on LinkedIn. We can't just incrementally build on what worked in the last century. We've got to drill down. We've got to find those real first principles and build forward from there so that we can create a platform that our grandchildren are going to live and play and solve their problems on. Where we're going to need your awkwardness, your anxiety, your inconsistency, your unpredictability, your nerves, your stuckness, your confusion, and your confident incorrectness. Thank you for your humanity, and thank you for your time and attention this evening.
Thank you, John. Anyone have any questions they want to ask? We've got a couple minutes.
Just enjoying the fact that his final slide looks like many projects or businesses that we've seen in the past couple centuries.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
Unrelated, I saw a really great dad joke on Twitter the other day. It was somebody posted a picture of the Hindenburg, and the tweet underneath was, "Whoa, this blew up."
Oh my goodness.
I love the suggestion of always going back to the Agile principles, right? That's kind of like my go-to when I can tell something's off, but I can't put my finger on what,
Yeah.
Going back to those and like you said, just are we breaking anything here, right? And
Yeah. But even beyond that, like it's good, especially if the problem seems to be at a tactical, mechanical level.
Mhm.
Let's drop down to the Agile principles. But even there, I be careful about like for lack of a better word, deifying those principles. They came from
Right.
somewhere. They're
Right.
like what's behind that everybody in the room could agree on. What if
and always going back to, do we even understand the problem we're trying to solve, right? And that's a huge one. I find myself, trying to circle back around to a lot myself, and often it's later in the fact than I should have, right? We recently did product management training at our company, and went through and did learned how to do the jobs to be done exercise and the pain point exercises and different things like that. And I find myself using that a lot. Before we start solutioning, let's make sure that we all understand what's the job we're trying to accomplish, what's the outcome we're trying to accomplish, and where are the pain points and the problems. And sometimes there's more than one pain point, right? So we might come up with a solution that fixes one, but it doesn't fix the other three or something like that. So going
Yeah.
back to that is a good one too. I find myself a lot in agile transformations, always forgetting to ask that question early on, right? I'm like, well, you hired me to come in and train everybody on how to do agile and coach everybody on agile, right? And then
Right.
later on, I start digging into the problems and and trying to come up with, okay, here's my plan, right? Of my transformation plan of how we're gonna try to attack this. And then I realized, wait, I forgot to ask them like why they thought agile was even the solution, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes we're afraid to ask that because we know that what if they say, oh well, maybe agile's not the solution? Well, you hired the wrong person then.
What if they ask for something that I don't know how to do?
Right.
That's yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I think that's the not to poo-poo all over SAFe, but I think that's the challenge I have with SAFe is a lot of times they're coming in with an approach, right? With a certain plan, an approach, and it's not always the most optimal solution, for that. So
Yeah.
it's a struggle.
So
You talked about aligning on purpose, John, and I think that's really important, but not just among our peers, our closest colleagues. I think the biggest challenges I've had, I'll call it in transformations or implementing this approach, is we don't reach up far enough.
Yeah.
We don't reach up to the people who are selling, the people who are marketing, the people who are budgeting, right? And so we hit brick walls when we try to change the way we work in building these products, even talking to customers, because we aren't aligned across that big org chart you showed earlier.
Yeah. You think there's what makes us so shy about doing?
Well, I don't think anybody who knows me would ever call me shy, but and I've tried, and it's asking the hard questions, because when I think it's just is working hard to cross those lines, to cross those boundaries.